One of the most important things we can teach it being adaptability because the world is changing so fast. And so our children have to have the skills to adapt to a rapidly changing world, to be comfortable in many different environments. Hello, friends, and welcome to today's episode or long overdue episode of What We Tell Our Daughters. Little background over the last 3 weeks. Well, over a month now, we've been traveling, but since you talked to me last, we've been traveling. Last time I was in Thailand, we were in Thailand for a couple of weeks, and now we are in Bali. And it's just been really busy, and life happened, and I'm a little overdue. And because of this overdue-ness, it led me to start thinking about the podcast I did last time we traveled on traveling with little children. And if you haven't listened to that one, I would recommend listening to that one first and then come listen to this one because I have a pretty different perspective after this round of traveling, whether it's just the change in our daughter's age or the difference in where we are, like how different it feels to be in Asia versus in the West, right? In Europe or in the US. I think it's a very different feeling of life. You're eating a lot of different types of food, so a lot of things feel very new. And I wonder if that plays into what we're experiencing with her. So that's what I'm going to share today and some insights on just what's different this time versus last time we traveled, and also what we're doing about it. And also my encouragement that if you've traveled before and you've had a similar experience to this one, not to stop traveling, right? Just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. I think it's an opportunity for us to really learn more of who our children are and what they need from us and how we can better support them when we're doing things that put them outside of their comfort zone. So, listen to the podcast from gosh, quite a few months back. I'll link it in the notes of this show today. And then you can go ahead and listen to this one on my new perspective or rewriting the story on what it's like to travel with very young children. So this time around, Atlas is almost two. She's 21 months, and it's been much more of a challenge than traveling with her previously. I will say, I think flying is exactly the same. So if you want to hear some tips on flying, you can go back to my other episode. But what's been most challenging is that in growing into her personality, whether it's just how different it is to live in Southeast Asia, or actually her personality and what she needs and wants out of life, she has asked for home many, many times on this trip, which is so fascinating to me because for whatever reason, I never in a million years imagined that my daughter would want to go home. She loves to explore, she loves to adventure, she loves to try new things. And so it was really surprising to me when she started asking for home. And after thinking about it for a little while, I realized this is very different than previous times we've traveled. For the first month of traveling, it was just me and my husband and my daughter. Whereas last time we traveled, we went right to seeing family. So I think maybe that buffered the change a little bit where she had familiar faces. She knew, the people she was around. It didn't feel quite so new. This time we've done a huge time change in a new direction, one she's never gone in, to a pretty different climate that we haven't really been in. I mean, Belize was pretty hot and humid, but I think there's something in the air, the energy in Southeast Asia just feels different than definitely being in the US. I mean, it feels different than being in Belize. It feels different than any place we've ever been before. Let's just say that. And so I think maybe she's picking up on that too. And I think maybe she's also at an age where she feels more that need for comfort, that need for familiar, when so much in just who she is and how she is and how she's interacting with the world is changing on a daily basis. So that's one thing that I've noticed. In the first couple of weeks of her staying home, I felt so sad. I felt so bad that we'd put her through this experience of being somewhere new and different and that this was hard for her. But shortly after kind of sitting with it and thinking about, what I wanted to do about that and how I was going to support her, I realized this is how we like to live our lives. And we love to travel. We love to explore. It's one of the ways we want to teach her about the world. And so this isn't going to go away. So we need to find a way for her to get comfortable with this. And so we started reframing home as just the place where we all are, right? Every time she says she wants to go home, we say, well, we are home right now. This is our home for right now. Mama's here, Papa's here, Atlas is here. Everyone is here together. So this is our home. I think that's been helping a little bit to kind of reframe what home means. And I think we're very lucky that she is still breastfeeding because I think that that's giving her a new layer of comfort as well. I think that having something that feels very constant for her is really helping with that transition. The other thing is just about a week, a little more than a week ago, my parents came to meet us to be our nanny for the time that we're still traveling. And that's also, I think, really helped ease her feeling of something is different, something is off. I want more familiarity because now she has two more people who are very familiar to her. Even she still is her usual self in terms of being very attached to me and very attached to Andrew. And not wanting to, it's not like having grandparents around all the time where she just wants to go be with them. It still takes a lot of kind of that easing in process, but I think just having familiar faces is really helping with that. So if it's feasible for you, if it's possible to travel and bring your family, I know that's a very unique situation that we're in, but I think I highly recommend it. The other thing we've been working on is finding super fun activities for her. So this is something we've not had to do because last time we traveled, she was so little. She wasn't quite at the stage where she really needed activities and fun and other kids around. Whereas this time I feel she really needs that and she thrives on it and she loves it. So we've been actively seeking out every type of kid activity we can find. And I think that is also helping to kind of reframe this different experience as fun and interesting. And even though sometimes maybe it's a little uncomfortable because it is so new, there's still a lot of great things that are coming from it. So, I mean, even for us, it's been really interesting to find a ton of what we call kid cafes in Southeast Asia. And I think there's a lot of like play groups or play places where you can take kids in the US. Honestly, not so much in Europe, although we haven't looked at that much. But it seems to be a big thing in Southeast Asia where there's these big, huge play places and they have a cafe next door and the parents can go hang out and have a coffee while their kids play in, the ball pit or whatever millions of toys they have for kids. So it's been super fun because we trade off. One of us works, the other one goes in the play place with Atlas, does all the things, and then we switch. And so she gets a good 2 hours of playtime. We each get a good hour of work in, and that's been working really well for us. So if you're traveling with a little baby or a young child or really any age child, this is a really cool thing that I would encourage you to look up wherever you are, or these like kid cafes or play kind of places where they're also catering to parents who want to just sit and hang out, or maybe parents who are nomads or travelers like us who also need to do a little bit of work. So that's been really great. I mean, we're in Sanur right now, Bali, which is on the coast. And there's a cafe called the Genius Cafe, and they have a cafe and they have kids stuff, and they also have co-working for parents. So I think there are more and more things like this popping up that are really trying to meet everyone where they're at, which has been super interesting for us to see because historically it was just the two of us traveling. So we didn't get any of this perspective on how other cultures treat children aside from just like a very surface level experience. Now we're so immersed in this interaction with adults and children, and it's been so interesting to see like how children are treated in other cultures, what kind of value they put on children specifically. So we've learned that in Bali, actually, and in Hindu religion, children are really high, not on a pedestal, but they offer a lot of respect to this age of childhood, to the age of childhood. And I find that so cool. Like we went to this really amazing, not a Michelin-ish restaurant. Like I don't think it has a star. It's not quite that fancy, but it's really good food and fine dining. And they had a huge kid place and they had a kid menu that was like super amazing and special for kids. And they give all the kids balloons at the end. And I think there's very few places like that in other countries that we've found. We've tried to go to some really fancy Michelin restaurants before with Atlas when she was super small, and they just don't let kids in at all in other countries. So this was a really cool experience to see that they're actually just catering to children and helping them have just as cool of an experience as the parents. And food is something that we love to splurge on if we're going to go have a night out and have a really fun food experience. So it's been fun to find a place where we can do that. I mean, here in Bali, so far, the food is amazing. I mean, I think I have yet to have a bad meal and mostly just really amazing meals and pretty super healthy. I'm not totally sure like what they cook with as far as oils go, but I feel pretty good. I don't feel like I've been eating food that's not well made or with poor ingredients. So that's another thing that's been interesting this time around is usually when we travel, we do still cook a lot. If we're in an Airbnb or somewhere that has a kitchen, we cook quite a bit. But I found that in any country where I can't trust the tap water, I have such a hard time cooking at home because it means I have to wash my veggies in bottled water or in whatever kind of giant jug of water I can get. And it just feels like so much more of an ordeal than ordering food. I had the same problem in Mexico, cooking for ourselves. So I think if we were to live here full time or for a longer period of time, which we are considering, we'd really can probably consider getting some sort of water filter on the house so that we wouldn't have to deal with that as much. That was a side story. Because I think that another podcast that deserves time and attention is just what it's like to be here because it's been so fun. And this is an absolutely beautiful place. And people are so kind and so lovely and especially amazing to children. And everyone wants to pick our daughter up and go take her, wherever with them, which is also very different, right? Because in the US and even in Europe, I don't think anyone would come pick our daughter up and just try to take her anywhere. Whereas here, it's almost like they're surprised when she doesn't go with them. When she's like, no, 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 I don't feel comfortable doing that. They're much more used to children, I think, being comfortable in more of this kind of communal environment, being raised by many people or having a lot of different adults interacting with them on a daily basis. So I think it's really good for her. And I can see this process. We've been here in Bali for about 2.5 weeks. I can see this process of her opening up a lot. So when we first got here, it was like, no, 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 no to everyone. And now, 2.5 weeks in, she's telling stories to strangers and she's telling people, what happened during her day and what she wants and giving high fives and saying hi without being prompted. So that's also been really, really great for her. And another reason why I say that even though it's been challenging and she has been much more challenging than the last time we traveled, just because of how much um, space, like she needs to be held a lot and she needs a lot of comfort and reassurance that we're here and this is new and it's all going to be okay. And, she's not sleeping as well and she's nursing a lot because I think that's her safety blanket. So this has felt like a much more challenging trip. Whereas the last time I felt that she was so engaged with life, she actually needed less of us. This time I felt she needs so much from us to be okay. And so it has been a bit exhausting, but I've also seen this really beautiful new cultural experience she's had. She's learning from this culture. Even at 21 months, she's starting to pick up on different ways of being and how the other kids interact with each other and how they take care of each other and how they all want to play and get right up and talk to her versus in Europe, a lot of times kids don't really talk to her at the playground, They'll do their own thing and occasionally they'll come up with curiosity or they'll be curious about her eye patch, but they don't usually really engage with her. Whereas here, I feel they're much more used to just getting, whoever it is, they just want to get right in from day one, from the first moment and interact. So all that is to say, I am rewriting the story of what I said before. So if you listen to the last podcast and you're like, you're crazy, my child is super hard, or we had a really difficult travel experience. So whatever you're talking about right now is not true. I totally get what you're saying now. It has been a lot more challenging than it was last time. And I still think it's absolutely 100% worth it because our children learn so much by doing and seeing and experiencing. And, Andrew and I were talking about this the other day. We think that as time goes on and technology becomes more and more a part of our lives, and very reasonably, our children are going to have AI tutors who teach them everything they need to know in the way they like to learn within 5 years, right? So one of two things. One, I think one of the most important things we can do is give our children outdoor time. So if we're sending them to school, we should be sending them to schools that have a lot of time outdoors because they're probably going to have a lot of time with technology at home. And the way that we work, the lives that we live right now, we can't step away from a computer for 5 hours a day, but she should. And so we should send her somewhere where she can do that. That's my perspective on especially early childhood education. But we were also talking about one of the most important things we can teach it being adaptability because the world is changing so fast. And so our children have to have the skills to adapt to a rapidly changing world, to be comfortable in many different environments, to say, okay, this isn't serving me anymore. I need to learn a new way or be comfortable leaving something behind. And in order to, I think for us, one of the best ways we can teach that is by doing what we're doing right now, by traveling, by adventuring, by showing her things don't stay static, that we can't get so comfortable in our little bubble that we're not able to step outside of it and go explore and fully embrace life in a different way. So those are all of the beautiful things that come from experiences like this, along with the more challenging things. But I also think it helps us to understand who she is a little bit more. I had this perspective of her that she was uh, adventurous and wild and like up for any kind of adventure. And I don't think that's not true. But I think what I've also learned about her is that she also needs grounding. She can't just be completely free, completely new, completely, everything novel, that she also needs wherever we go and however we choose to continue doing this, she's going to need some sort of consistency, whether that's our schedule, probably not just because of the hours we work. Probably that's going to be more like making sure she understands that Andrew and I are a constant, or maybe it's bringing things with us that are her constant, or maybe it's having routines that are a constant, like we do bath and we do book before bed, or first thing in the morning. This is what we all do as a family. We get up, we we make our breakfast together, we light incense, whatever it may be. I think it's hard. We have great bedtime practices right now. We don't have really great morning practices right now, but I have a lot of ideas for what I imagine that to be when she's a bit more able to recognize uh, the value of not just routine, but kind of like a ritual of how we start our day, of how we do things as a family. And I think that will help be more of a constant for her as time goes on. So that is my current perspective on traveling with young children. I highly recommend it. And if you have any questions or comments or different perspectives, I would love it if you would share them in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.